I will ask first of all of Mr. Hardouvelis. We all know him. We, especially finance journalists, we know his sense of humor and his good way of transmitting things. You have a presentation. You have a few things that will be the basis of this discussion. Please go on. Decide the language. Feel free to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Davlos. I'll try to be brief, and I'll start with, I guess, the question as to why is happening. What's in the mind of Donald Trump for doing this? And he has already claimed that he wants to rewire the global trading system. He wants to, for sure, bring higher paid manufacturing jobs back to the US. That's what his voters want him to do. He wants to make allies like Greeks and the Europeans pay for the security umbrella that the US is providing over the last 50, 60 years, who he considers as free riders. Perhaps we are free riders on defense. And domestically, he keeps claiming that he is going to use the tariff proceeds for domestic initiatives. The tariffs, by the way, for the American citizens is like equivalent to a 4% increase in taxation. It's a huge amount. So why is he doing this? This is something that essentially destroying the soft capital that the US has accumulated over the years. He's destroying the architecture of the global trading system that the US was a founding member and was promoting it. And why is he doing it? It's a question, I always had this question because there's no benefit. I mean, for an economist, it destroys economic rules. I discovered, and I urge you to find it, there's an essay by Stephen Miran, the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, who right after the elections in November, he wrote that he thinks that essentially the US is losing in this global trading system. They're providing more than they're getting. And the dollar is way overvalued. They ought to decrease the value of the dollar. He's hoping for he called it a Mar-a-Lago accord, similar to the Plaza Accord. Some of us, I remember it, I'm old enough to remember this back in the early 80s, to bring the dollar down. And he will use tariffs as a tool to achieve it. He will raise tariffs in the beginning and then come to each country and say, okay, you're with me, we'll do a deal, we'll sign a deal, I'll reduce for you, you're a good guy, you push me, you will reduce the dollar. So it seems like what's going on in the last 10 days is like a reflection of what the essay was a month ago. Now, I have some slides to give you a sense of history. Here is a graph that it's all over the media. I'm sure you've seen it in the last few days. The average tariff rate on US imports. And you realize that a 20% increase, and this is the minimum that's happening now, it takes us back essentially to the 1930s. Tariff rates were much bigger before, but it takes us back to the 1930s. But the change is not, I mean, we should not make the mistake of comparing today with the Great Depression of the 1930s. The Great Depression happened for many other reasons and happened after the recession started, the tariffs. The change today is 3 times bigger than the change that occurred with the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, and in an economy which is 3 times more open. Okay, so essentially you have 9 times the shock, so to speak, comparing to the early 30s. Now a lot of discussion in the media is about a sort of an accounting exercise that people do. Okay, if you raise the tariff rates this much, this is how much consumption will decline, et cetera, et cetera. They all talk about the demand side effect and also on the inflation side. There is another element that apparently could be a lot bigger, which is the uncertainty that the new policy by Donald Trump, which is a strange policy and nobody can understand, is generating. And here's a graph that some Italian economists have done it. They followed. It starts in 1960. It's done every month. There wasn't much uncertainty about trade policy for many, many decades. And all of a sudden, in the previous Trump administration and the new Trump administration, it's going up. So this, the reason I bring it up is it will have an effect. And I'll show you something. JP Morgan recently used the IMF model to see what a 20% increase in tariffs may do to the growth in the various economies. And they say, well, the United States will also be affected because we assume retaliation. We assume that if the US imposes a tariff on another country, the other country will respond with an equal amount. Okay. The US will be affected most, by 2%. Euro area, 1.5%. China, a little bit less, et cetera, et cetera. What's interesting in this graph, if you can see it, is that the largest effect is the orange bar, especially for the euro area. We in Europe are going to be affected by the uncertainty and the destruction of the environment we operate, not so much by the accounting and the fact that the cost of some goods have risen, et cetera, et cetera. We may be flexible and avoid it, but the uncertainty is doing a bigger damage. So that's interesting to point out. In Greece, by the way, the minister talked about it earlier. I don't want to repeat him. The effects are, we don't expect them to be very large. We're a much more closed economy than the euro area vis-a-vis the US. Only 1% of GDP is our exports to the US. But we're maybe hit on a second wave. If the euro area is affected negatively, we will be affected as well. Most of the discussion during the last few days is on real GDP effect, on the effect on the real economy, not so much on inflation. And I think the market is right not to concentrate so much on inflation. Here I have a graph of the expectations of inflation over the last year, and you see that in the last year nothing has happened in people's minds about what expected inflation is. The only change happened in the US and China. In the US, we see inflation expectations going up, and in China, we have a deflation problem, and it became bigger after the Trump election. I will simply come and show you some graphs of how the markets responded since last Tuesday, a week from today, or 8 days from today, we had the announcement. These graphs start with 0 on Monday. On April 1st. April 2, we had the announcements. You see the stock markets. I have here the European stock market, American, and the Greek stock market. They have fall about 15 or 10%. So the stock markets were hit a lot because they worry about the economy.
And they continue today. There was a stop, and they continue today.
Okay. The bond market, on the other hand, I have the change in the yield here, government 10-year yield for 3 countries again. US, Germany, and Greece. There is some up and down in basis points. Nothing much has changed. And the reason for that is that there are 2 forces behind the bonds. One is the real effect, the real economy is coming down, that's pushing yields down. Inflation is expected up, it's pushing yields up. So it's like they do wash out. And when it comes to currencies, because something that Trump obviously is worried about, you see that the Swiss franc, I have it there, the yen and the euro have appreciated, but the Chinese yuan has depreciated vis-a-vis the dollar. The Chinese want to make sure they control it more. They want to make sure they go down. Anyway, from the markets, the market, you can get a sense as to what the fear is the stock market. So today, the open questions are, I don't want to take time, are the markets, have they overreacted or they're too relaxed? Do we expect more depth on the stock market, or are you going to see a recovery? And then the other questions we should discuss is globalization in retreat, obviously in the short run. Hopefully, the Trump policy can change in the midterm elections, and that's in 2027, I guess, November. It's going to take some time. Are we witnessing the beginning of, should we worry? Is the drop in real GDP I showed you, 1%, 2%, is it that big? Is it comparable to the Great Depression? Now, the Greeks here understand this is nothing. I mean, we went through a 25% decline, okay? This is nothing. I don't think this is a repetition of the Great Depression. In fact, I do hope that policymakers have learned economics over the last 70 years. They know how to respond, and they will respond properly. So hopefully the Trump team is an isolated team in the world. And they behave differently. Will the U.S. recover to its previous global hegemony? I think this is my answer is probably no. I think this is the biggest, what Trump is doing is a big damage to the U.S., to the way the world perceives the U.S. And it's losing its soft capital, its soft power. And what about us in Europe? In the previous panel, the people discussed the solution. The solution for us is, of course, not to respond, not to retaliate, but look inside our union and try to make the union really work. And look at the Draghi report and at the Letta report and make sure the common market does work and the obstacles disappear. So this is the way to go.
He said, Mr. Beck said about who's right, the two people in the White House. They created a formula about these tariffs. So is this formula completely nonsense?
Yes,
I have a feeling that it is.
It is complete nonsense. We can move on from it.
Okay.
Well, it has some rationale from their perspective, which is if you have a surplus, if you're a foreign country, you have a surplus for the U.S., then they will penalize you.
Yes, but this is not tariffs in order to have reciprocal tariffs.
They deflated by the amount of the imports somehow. And anyway, it's their game. I mean, they didn't apply it to Europe. They gave a 20% to all Europeans, whether you had 14% or whatever.
And why not Russia?
With Russia, I guess they don't trade, do they?
We hope not.
We have.
I would like, though, to ask Mr. Hardouvelis about another Trump enemy, let's say, Mr. Powell. What he will do with his interest rates? He didn't want to get them down because he was afraid of inflation. Maybe now he will end up doing what Trump wants in order to stop the lowering of GDP.
I think the Fed is very anxious to make sure it keeps its credibility. So it will behave as it always behaved. It will look at the data and act accordingly. Given the fact that the probability of a recession has gone up, it may, yes, you're right, it may be more, it may be more prone towards ease. Because although, you know, the Fed also looks at inflation. And unlike the ECB, the Fed has two aims, inflation and the economy. But given...
and working force, I think she has to
they may do it. But I think, they would like to ease, but they may not behave, they may delay it to show that they're independent to Trump.
Okay.
I think that's my sense.
He has done it already, I think.
So
previous occasions.
But in Europe, on the other hand, the market expects the ECB to ease. I mean, we were expecting the rate to be at 2% at the end of the year, and now everybody expects to be 1.5%.
Okay. So, our time is up. Ακολουθεί η κυρία Μαρία Νικόλτσου, καλή μου φίλη και συνάδελφος. Maria. Thank you very much for this discussion. I think it was really important.